Hello and welcome to the first of a two-part series on the Construction Record podcast focused on the upcoming Ontario election. I'm digital media editor Warren Fry. We've compiled a series of recent interviews Daily Commercial News staff writer Angela Gismondi conducted with Ontario construction industry stakeholders about what they think are the key issues they'd like to see addressed by whoever wins on June 2nd. Our first interview is with Richard Lyall. He's the president of the Residential Construction Council of Ontario.
Big focus, of course, has been on, the housing supply problem, and then, of course, the whole area of skilled trades and apprenticeship, and fixing the system, along with immigration, and then, various other sundry regulatory things. But, those are likely our two biggest issues, and there's a lot going on there too. It's sort of like there's a lot of subcomponents to it, and then in terms of election positioning, we are supportive of the current government. A lot of other governments have stepped up to the plate, like the feds and some municipalities, and the other two parties have announced fairly comprehensive housing platforms. But we think that the Tories, this government, and Minister Clark have been on this issue from the get-go, and they've done a number of, like the more housing, more choice, more housing for everyone. They've hit the issue on a number of levels, much like they've done with skilled trades and apprenticeship. And of course, when you have systemic problems this big, they take a long time to change. It's like I use the analogy of, turning the super tanker, right, rather than a speedboat. And so these things take time, and we're pretty confident there'll be more measures coming down the road because, both of the issues are very complicated and have a number of elements to them. Like on the skilled trades and apprenticeship, there's an immigration element there too that's related to skilled trade supply. But there's many elements to these two main issues. And the third issue, of course, is innovation, right? I should mention that, and that's the whole modernizing and digitizing, our development and building approvals process. And about that. We've been working on that for some time, and that's complicated too as well. And so, but we feel that the current government has really been dealing with all three issues in a comprehensive way, and they've been doing it for a few years now. The other parties and the feds are now on board with certainly the sounds like they're on board with the immigration side of it, and also with with recognizing that we do have a housing supply problem. The NDP and the Greens and the Liberals all have their programs that they've announced now recently, and there's some laudable elements to all three, but we think on balance the Conservative government, the Ford government, really has the most comprehensive and realistic plan, all things considered. The one thing I was concerned about with the NDP and the Liberal plans, for example, I'm not sure about the Greens that they put it in there, but was the reintroduction of rent controls, taking them back to where they were before vacancy decontrol came in. And the problem with something like that is, it's huge, right? That's really dealing with the symptoms of a separate problem, a bigger problem. And the problem with doing what they're proposing is that it would really, the rental housing industry has come back to a certain degree, purpose-built rental, what we call PBRs. But that would really knock the stuffing out of that. And we need rental housing. And, the fact that we haven't been building rental housing is because of, state intervention.
Next up, we have an interview with Eric Schmidt, the Manager for Public Affairs and Innovation at the Ontario General Contractors Association.
So do you have like a list of priorities you would like to see implemented, whichever party comes into power in June? Okay.
So I would say when the next provincial government is elected and begins to work, the first thing we're obviously looking for is cooperation and obviously engagement directly with the industry and with industry associations. I think something else that we'd like to see is cooperation in terms of the approval of important projects across between like federal, provincial, and municipal. Just to provide greater clarity in terms of what these projects will look like, and also try to get them off the ground faster. Mm-hmm. I think fairness also through the procurement process when it comes to issues related to things like inflation or the skills deficit is also an important priority for us, as well as just general investment in infrastructure. I think we've seen across all the major parties that they're committing to significant investments in critical ICI projects, whether it be schools, hospitals, roads, and this is important for us in order to continue to sort of maintain that level of investment and to maintain the investment in our critical ICI infrastructure and the critical institutions that government is responsible for. And then finally, I'd say investment in the skilled trades is critical. We have a looming skills deficit in this province, and we need to maintain that investment and even double down on our efforts in order to address them. Something we've been working on has been also focusing on not just these sort of classic skilled trades, but also looking at project managers and other critical site staff, health and safety staff as well, to ensure that there's also an ample supply of that labor market as well, because they're also critical to the construction process.
Some of the associations are mentioning the 413 and the Bradford bypass. Do you guys have a position on that, or is it kind of included in the roads and transportation?
I would say that although we support any investment in infrastructure, it's not a directly ICI project, right? So we don't have a position on that.
Okay, sounds good.
I would say, though, that for many of our members, they do support the 413 due to the associated infrastructure investment that will occur whenever they build large highway projects, but it will not impact our members directly.
Anything else to add?
I would just like to sort of continue to communicate the message, sort of communication, collaboration, and cooperation between all levels of the industry, and specifically industry associations. So I think it's really important thing to mention that our industry, specifically industry associations and employer associations, have really worked effectively well together between all levels of government to solve big issues. And I'm hoping that this government, or whatever government is elected, recognizes this and continues to work with us in this capacity, because I think that's really how we can solve the big issues facing our industry.
Finally, Angela spoke with Karen Renkema-Millar, the Ontario Vice President of the Progressive Contractors Association of Canada.
Yeah, I think I'd formulate our asks kind of under two categories for our members that are increasingly important. I would say the first one that's top of mind for everybody in the industry is obviously access to workers. There's a number of different facets and a number of different pathways to accessing workers, obviously. We're in a point of there's just it's a perfect storm with people leaving the industry because of the pandemic, the amount of infrastructure investment that's coming to head right now, because we're rolling at full steam, the number of workers required to do that infrastructure work, as well as the retirements in the industry, and just working around all those types of types of scenarios. And so we're in this where we've concentrated on the skilled trades. And, for the past number of years, even under the previous Liberal government, there was, everybody was saying, they were looking at the Construction Sector Council or the Build Force numbers and saying we're going to hit a place where there's not going to be enough workers, but it just never seemed to come to fruition. It seems like, okay, we were holding steady at employment and we'd have like shortages in specific trades, but it didn't come to head like it has now. And I think that the perfect storm kind of happened that nobody could have probably perceived, even two and a half years ago. And so, I think top of mind for PCA as an association, but our members are telling us is, how are we going to find workers? How are we going to find people, how are we going to grow that next generation of workers? And we need workers right now. So there's both things kind of going on. So when we place, our thoughts around election platforms and advocacy asks and being able to weigh where the different parties are at on this issue, a big thing is how do we see it through the lens of not only nurturing our next generation of skilled trade workers, but also like what are the parties doing right now, or what are they thinking about to be able to and it's not only our industry, but to be able to help with the acute labor shortage. And, there's been a lot of things discussed over the past couple of weeks in the election and in the campaign. And, affordability is top of mind. Gas prices kind of bleed into affordability, housing, all of that, but nobody's actually getting to the real crux of the issue, is that without a workforce willing to, build things and be able to help the province's economic future, we're going to be stuck with continued inflationary measures, even if we can do as much as we want to interest rates, but if there isn't the workers available, we're going to still be in a situation of where projects are going to cost a lot more, houses are going to cost a lot more, just because there just isn't the availability of individuals to work in the industry. So I will say, it's unfortunate that this hasn't been more of an issue, but of course it is one of those kind of underlying issues and probably not necessarily easy to talk about on the campaign trail, but there needs to be, from all parties' perspective, just a really clear focus on the next 2 years. How are we going to find the workers? Of course, training the workers for the next generation is incredibly important as well, equally important. But I would say that, this government has made huge strides in that. They've been very innovative in that they have dedicated financial resources and policy resources to different programs that are, thinking outside of the box to attract workers, whether it be like a boot camp, introduction to construction over 14 days, whatever it may be, and providing those wraparound supports for people that may need those wraparound supports in order to just even try getting in the industry. So this government has done a terrific job. But I think what is essential now is, and those people may get into the industry tomorrow, that they very may well get into the industry tomorrow, but we're not going to solve the acute labor shortage in all industries across the province by just looking at, by introducing programs like this. We need to look externally as well, and whether it be interprovincial migration, which I understand across the country we're all in this labor shortage, so that may not happen, and maybe it's temporary measures on other immigration reforms, which honestly the province can't do a lot about, but recognizing that the province does have political levers in order to work with the federal government to push this issue forward. one thing that the Conservatives were talking about, the Progressive Conservatives and Minister McNaughton were examining prior to going into the election was how do we, first of all, double the amount of nominees under the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, but further, then how do we assess and look at those numbers and ensure that, a good proportion of those nominees are getting into our construction or skilled trade workers, and further to that, how do we assess experience? Like, do they need certifications before they come over? Because a lot of immigrant nominees in certain industries may not have those certifications. So how do we attract also, like your general labor that may have been working as a general laborer for 20 years in Brazil, and has a tremendous amount of experience, but he may not have a certification of any type, but would be a fantastic addition to our economy and a fantastic addition to our province. How do we change our policies and procedures within government that is so focused on, certificates and recognition to actually recognize just existing skill sets? And that's the dynamics of the construction industry, is that a lot of, some of the people that are the most skilled in the construction industry may not have a piece of paper to hang on the wall, but they're incredibly gifted individuals that would be a fantastic addition to the industry. So I would say, first of all, like the access to workers portion is key. And yeah, like I said, unfortunately, the only party that's actually really talked about it in any type of detail is really the Progressive Conservatives, the current government. The Liberal platform really makes absolutely no mention to skilled trades or to labor supply type issues. And going through the NDP platform, really they get into more of the nuts and bolts about compositions of boards like Skilled Trades Ontario, but don't really make the connection on how changing a composition of a board will actually dynamically change the makeup of the industry and increasing labor supply. Another thing, like as we get to like this next phase, I would say if next phase of government, whoever enters government, we get into this next phase of talking about modernizing the apprenticeship system. Now we have Skilled Trades Ontario. So now the question is, okay, so what are the next steps in modernizing the system? We've, a lot of money has been committed to different types of programs to get people into the skilled trades. Like I said, very innovative measures where, employers are saying these are the type of people we need and this is what we need to train. But I think it's time to now start talking about, okay, maybe, the other, on the other end of the spectrum, there's this whole question of productivity. Why is the construction industry lagging in productivity? And I think, there are some measures that can be committed to increasing productivity across the industry. Measures such as like allowing for like the stackable modular training approach. We've talked about that before. Maybe moving towards like more of a skill set assessment instead of, hours-based training only. Like allowing for a little bit of flexibility in that. Like some apprentices may need a year and a half to complete their first year. It's just going to take them a little bit longer, but some apprentices may only need 6 months to get to their, to their first level. So allowing for some flexibility in that approach as well. And I think, further, in order to increase apprentices, we've done a lot with ratios. We commend this government for right away dealing with the ratio issue. But I think, really we just need to look at how do we encourage now small employers to get into small employers to do more training, small and medium-sized employers do more training. There is a tremendous amount of resources that are dedicated from the employer side to ensuring that apprentices are being trained. And the government did take some small steps in the fall economic statement last year, talking about talking about tax incentives for employers. But I think, but it was only certain types of apprentices, if you hire them and if they're a specific age and if they're coming from a specific background. But you know what, at this point, it doesn't matter. With our acute labor shortage, it should not matter who the apprentice is or how old they are. If somebody's interested in the industry, we shouldn't punish an employer because he's found an apprentice that happens to be 28 that no longer wants to work on computer software. We shouldn't punish an employer and not provide a tax incentive for that employer. So I think there could be a lot more work done on making those tax incentives for employers more universal, regardless of the individual who's getting in the industry.
That's it for this episode, but tune in next Wednesday, where we'll continue with the series with interviews with Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario Executive Director Nadia Todorova, Ontario Building Trades Business Manager Marc Arsenault, and Ontario Sewer and Watermain Construction Association Executive Director Patrick McManus. And if you'd like to hear other episodes of the Construction Record podcast, we're on Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Spotify, as well as the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening.